Langston Colin Wilkins, PhD, is an assistant professor of folklore and African American studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Dr. Wilkins is the author of Welcome to Houston, Hip Hop Heritage in Hustletown, which was released through the University of Illinois Press in August of 2023. And that book is on order and will be available soon at the library. His research interests include African American folklife, African American music, urban folklore, car culture, and public folklore. Before moving into academia, Dr. Wilkins served as the state folklorist for Washington State. Dr. Wilkins is a native of Houston, Texas, and received his PhD from Indiana University's Department of Folklore and Ethnomusicology in 2016. So please join me in welcoming Langston Colin Wilkins.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. And hey, thank you for arranging this event. Major shout out to the Vermont Humanities Council, Vermont Humanities, and the library system, two institutions that mean a whole lot to me. And yes, I'm delighted to present some aspects of my research. The title of my presentation, is Welcome to Houston, Hip Hop Heritage in Hustletown, which is also the title of my book. Let's see. Oh, I need to share my screen. Hold on one sec. Got ahead of myself. Yep. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So, yes, Welcome to Houston, Hip Hop Heritage in Hustletown, which is the title of my new book that came out in August of 2023. So just to dive right in, I suspect that some of you may know who this is pictured here in these two images. This is Megan Thee Stallion, one of the most popular hip hop artists and popular cultural figures of the moment. The picture on my left, is from when she won a Grammy Award for the Best Rap Album in 2021, and she can be seen along with Beyonce throwing up the Houston hand sign. And the pic next to that is a picture she used to announce her graduation from Texas Southern University in Houston, Texas. And she's pictured standing in front of a couple of slabs, which is a car practice that's part of local hip hop heritage. I'll get to that a bit more in a minute. So in these two images, she's using her hometown traditions to announce two kind of momentous or mark two momentous occasions in her life, which, in my eyes, works to reinforce the impact of the city of Houston and its hip hop culture on her identity. And she does this a lot. Recently, she released a freestyle called Southside Royalty. The South Side being a reference to the area of town where she spent much of her youth. So in short, her city and her neighborhood of origin forms part of her public image and her musical identity. And these places and spaces impact how she wants audiences to understand her artistry and her image. Skip it. And so it's images like this that inspired, yes, my current book, Welcome to Houston, Hip Hop Heritage in Hustletown. The book is an ethnographic examination of Houston's hip hop scene. So I did field work in Houston for over a year, and then I actively engaged with the scene for maybe 10 years after that. I interviewed over 30 artists and practitioners. I went to numerous shows. I did a lot of archival work to produce the book. And essentially, the book focuses on the role of place in the development and maintenance of Houston's local hip hop heritage. And so using this ethnographic information, I showed how local hip hop heritage is a product of this intimate bond between individuals and their environment. And I'm going to walk us through that process here this evening. But a little bit about the general philosophies underpinning the book, or essentially what inspired the work. For me, it was this general feeling that, or idea, that the way we talk about hip hop culture does not reflect the true nature of it. And that common definitions or understandings of hip hop are limiting. So, for example, when we talk about hip hop, some of us talk about it as this multi-million dollar global industry, right? And that's true, right? It's currently the most popular, or one of the most popular musical genres in the United States. Hip hop is now, at least as of 2021, maybe responsible for about 25% of all music consumption in the United States. So yes, it's a big dominant music genre. That's true. Or some of us focus on the New York-based roots of hip hop, and this traditional definition of hip hop as a culture consisting of four elements: the emceeing or rapping, the DJing, graffiti art, and b-boying or breakdancing. And yeah, that's also true. So both of these understandings are still relevant and still true to some extent. But at the same time, hip hop culture looks differently across space. Each locale, each area where hip hop is produced, has generated their own hip hop traditions based on the experiences and dispositions of the people in those cities. So, keeping with that, as far as more motivations for this project, I'm a hip hop nerd, and I guess the professional term for it is hip hop scholar, but I'm really just a nerd. I've been obsessed, truly obsessed with hip hop since I was 12 years old. Not just because it's entertaining, but also because it offered lots of insight into different Black and non-Black, really, spaces around the country. Um, Place has long played a super important role in hip hop culture. The earliest form of hip hop culture was the graffiti tag. And back then, back in the 70s, it was comprised of a graffiti writer's name and the street number, the street that they lived on, right? In the same era, b-boying or breakdancing was in part about these marginalized folks using their bodies to seize public space. And then later on down the line, you had rappers like Eazy-E, pictured top in the middle, who wore his town of Compton on his hat. Or later on, the late Nipsey Hussle, who promoted his Crenshaw Street through a line of T-shirts and had an album called Slauson Boy. Crenshaw and Slauson being two notable streets also in Compton. Bottom, Queen Latifah, who's one of my favorite people in the world, rapped about her home state of New Jersey and the culture there. Then you have Put On For My City by Jeezy and Kanye West. And this goes on, right? And so I wanted to know why this idea of putting on or representing your city or neighborhood was so, so important in hip hop. As was already stated, I'm from Houston, Texas. I was born and raised in a working class neighborhood, working class Black neighborhood called Hiram Clark. And growing up there, I witnessed and experienced the importance of representing your neighborhood. I did it and do it. My parents did it, right? And we represent these spaces and places in a number of ways. We have hand signs, right? Every neighborhood has a hand sign, and the city of Houston does itself. You can see, I think to the bottom left there, Beyonce throwing up the Third Ward hand sign, Third Ward being a major neighborhood in Houston. There are haircuts that represent parts of town. Up in the top right corner is the South Side Fade, and that's a popular haircut, or was, in the South Side part of town. We wear clothing with our names, neighborhoods on it, right? Some of us get tattoos with our neighborhoods on it, and so this attachment to place continues to be strong, even in our highly technological society where people are connecting with folks all over the world. And that's just everyday culture, right? In Houston hip hop, place plays a more important role, and representing place is more concentrated. And I wanted to know why, right? So that's what inspired this project. So digging into the Houston hip hop scene and Houston's hip hop heritage a bit, Houston has a very unique hip hop cultural heritage, which is comprised of yeah, three core practices, right? You have the screw music, you have the car culture called slab, and some people include this drug culture called lean as part of Houston's hip hop heritage. I'm not sure where I fall in with that, but some people consider that to be part of the heritage too. But my larger point with the book is that this cultural heritage was born out of this intense identification with place among working class African American folks in Houston. And so that's what I want to explore today. I want to deconstruct that hip hop heritage, showing how it emerged from African American Houstonians identifying with and embodying place on several levels. And also, I want to talk just a little bit about the complications of musical heritage. So I want to start with a bit of theory, a really simple theory, place and place identity. So when we say place, right, we're not just talking about the physical environment. Places are the interaction between the physical environment, buildings, people, and social activities. Social activity like communication, traditions, ways of life, rules, regulations, and such, right? So yeah, place is the physical environment plus the built environment, plus community, plus social activity. And so in my work through the book, important places include streets, parks, apartment buildings, neighborhoods, whole sides of town, and even the city itself. But also, of course, the people and social life that define those places. Also important, theoretically in my work, is this concept of place identity, which is defined as individual or collective identity constructed through connection to a physical or social place and expresses the meaning or emotional ties associated with that place. That's a definition I pulled from somewhere. But essentially, place identity is a process by which, through interaction with places, people describe themselves in terms of belonging to a specific place. So, place identity is simply the ways in which in which places become part of our identity. It's the ways that places that are important to us become important parts of the way we understand and present ourselves. And yeah, and this shouldn't be too hard of a concept to grasp. I mean, we represent places all the time to varying degrees, whether it's our hometowns, our colleges, high schools, all these different things. We represent place to different and varying levels. But my work focuses on a more concentrated and pervasive form of place identity called repping the hood. And this is a social philosophy that, in practice, that was communicated to me when I was doing field work. And so in Houston's working class culture, repping the hood is this intentional, explicit, and active identification with places. It's sort of a hyper and more concentrated version of place identity that emerged within the particular context of Houston's inner cities and also street culture. And I think what separates repping the hood from just general place identity that we all kind of experience is the frequency and intentionality of it, right? You proactively, aggressively, and strategically rep your hood, right? And it's a core part of our way of life. It's both very common and depending on the context, it can also be strategic. So, why is this practice of repping the hood so prevalent? There's several core reasons. One is the presence of segregated civic space and the development of Black civic space in Houston. You know, Houston's one of the most diverse cities in the country, but it's also deeply segregated. Traditionally, most Black Houstonians live in the north side or south sides of town, which, and I kind of mentioned the south side earlier, but they're two colloquial names for these two collectives of Black neighborhoods, one north of downtown Houston and one south of downtown. And it's hard to understand on this map, but these areas are far away from each other. There are multiple highways and freeways between them. And Houston's public transportation, you know, it's just not good. And so, like, to get from the south side, which is in the red, to the north side, that's about a 45-minute drive. And it's, you know, almost impossible on the bus. So what happens is the north side and south side aren't just places to live, right? They become social identities for people. They become part of our personal identity, the way we understand ourselves, and part of how others perceive us. And so, in some ways, they operate as folk groups. And even within these specific areas, the groups of smaller neighborhoods that make up the north side and south side are expansive and they're far away from each other. So you really kind of stick to your neighborhood. And as such, and in that process, you become bonded to it. Also, you know, general lack of resources in these areas is part of this conversation. These neighborhoods are among the poorest in the city. There's a lack of traditional forms of cultural capital like new cars, homes, more money, higher education, and things like that due to racism and economic oppression. And so in this context, the neighborhood, right, or neighborhoods and other places and spaces become sources of affirmation and empowerment, right? Mostly because they're accessible. A uh, a former gangster rapper turned Christian rapper, Lil Rascal from Houston, he once told me, and I'm gonna quote him, quote, "You know, in the hood, man, we don't have anything, so everybody inherits the hood, and you protect it like it's your own." End quote. And so, possessing the hood or repping the hood has a low barrier of entry. It doesn't cost money. You don't need higher education. You just have to believe in it and you have to represent it. So, yeah, segregation and social isolation, the lack of resources, and also part of this is street culture. All these things combine to make repping the hood a vital practice within these neighborhoods. And so, in the book and in this presentation, the philosophy of repping the hood and this intense place identity was and remains a catalyst in the development of Houston's hip hop heritage, right? So, the practices that comprise the heritage, especially the screw music and slabs, are products of people's desire to rep their hoods. And each of these practices is inextricably tied to place in the desire to represent place. For example, got ahead of myself. So I'm going to break down the different elements of Houston's hip hop heritage and show how they emerge out of this practice of representing place. Starting with screw music. Screw music is Houston, Texas's local hip hop sound and tradition. It's a DJing and production practice that features super slow tempos and has a muddy, bass-heavy psychedelic sound accompanied by haunting vocals. Let's see if I can play a brief example of it.
This is how I'm coming.
So, screw music emerged in the early 1990s and was founded by DJ Screw, pictured up to the top left, who was a local DJ and producer from the south side of Houston. He began making slow down mixtapes out of his apartment, and very quickly local rappers began to come over to his house, perform freestyle performances over his slowed down instrumentals, and they would produce these mixtapes. Now, it's important to note that these rappers were not professional rappers. They weren't, at least at that time, just people out there seeking to build careers off of this. They were just teenagers and young adults who had a desire to rep their hoods. Lil Keke, who's pictured in the center, who was a member of the Screwed Up Clique, the crew of MCs that formed around DJ Screw. He called DJ Screw's house and these recording sessions a quote, a campground for different neighborhoods. And so, these neighborhoods were competitive, right? There was always, kind of playful conflict between them. But this competition between these neighborhoods was actually mediated through these DJ Screw tapes, right? For example, here's an old freestyle from Lil Keke, play it and break it down in a minute.
In my candy red toy, looking so good, represent my hood, 8100 block of Windermere and Hersheywood. What about Northdale across the tracks? What about the leaves? Hell yeah, they got my back. Biden's gonna shoot, we gon'
All right. So Lil Keke's verse is all about neighborhood. He literally says in this verse that he's representing his hood, which is around Windermere and Herschelwood streets in the south side. And he also shouts out nearby neighborhoods like the Northdale, the Orleans, and Botany Lane. And so the foundations of this screw music emerged out of DJ Screw, bringing these different neighborhoods together and creating a space for people to represent their neighborhoods. And this continues to be true for the screw tradition. And so I mentioned earlier Slab. This car culture is also part of Houston's hip hop heritage. Really quick, Slabs are older modeled luxury, American luxury cars like Cadillacs, Lincolns, and Buicks that are heavily customized with explosive, wet looking paint jobs, booming sound systems, elaborate trunk displays, and most importantly, these cone shaped chrome spoked rims called swingers or elbows, depending on who you talk to. These cars first emerged within the street culture of Houston's black neighborhoods in the mid 1980s, but quickly became tied to the local hip hop scene. And it became sort of a core practice and symbol of local hip hop heritage. And so, in some ways, Slab is kind of a hybrid automotive and musical practice. But Slab is also very much about representing your neighborhood. Again, Slab actually first emerged in Houston street culture as a way for these folks in the streets to represent their neighborhoods and increase their respect in the neighborhoods. But even as it moved outside of street culture and into hip hop culture, place continues to be important in a couple of major ways. The first way is through these trunk displays. You can kind of see that in the center, that blue car with the glass display in the trunk. These trunk displays are neon or glass displays that express explicit messages to people within or outside their community. These trunk displays most often feature some reference to neighborhood. So this car in the middle is a slab from the Scenic Woods neighborhood in Houston. You can see that written or spelled out in the top display. Along with that are the practice of slab lines, and this slab line, is the green cars to the far right are considered to be a slab line. And these are simply informal car clubs comprised of cars with the same paint color and typically originating from the same neighborhood in Houston. And while swinging, which is a type of, I guess, play, right, whereby cars weave from lane to lane in a slow manner, these slab lines operate as a unit in a show of community strength. And the same is true for social events such as block parties or car shows. And I took this picture at a car show, the picture of the green slabs. Slab lines proceed into an event in a straight line. They position themselves as a unit, and then they exit in the same manner. So again, ultimately, slab lines and slab in general are examples and represent neighborhood identity and strength. But keeping with this connection between slab and hip hop culture and its rootedness in place and in neighborhood, I want to talk real briefly about this North Side and South Side conflict that happened in the mid 90s and how it was mediated actually through music. So, again, hip hop is a folk culture, right? The music is entertainment, but it also functions as a form of communication within these small groups. In the mid 1990s, the slabs and the music were instrumental parts of a violent conflict between the two sides of town. So here's a story in a nutshell. The Screw tapes, DJ Screw's mixtapes, helped make red the dominant slab color all over the south side of Houston. Many members of the Screwed Up Clique drove red slabs, and they would mention that on these mixtapes. Here's a Screwed Up Clique member named Lil Randy talking about that very thing.
Why red? It was a good question. But for the majority, most people that I hung around, we did like red. Like me, I like my birthstone is red. Okay. The day I was born, I liked the red. It had nothing to do. But I know when I was maybe 10, 11 years old, I always said my car, I'm going to paint red. My car going to be red. Yeah. And I always been like that, you know what I'm saying? But when I'm on these Screw tapes saying that, that's what made it popular for the hood. You know what I'm saying? If I'm screaming, I'm from the south side, I'm drinking syrup, I'm riding in a red car. See, it's like the south side was my fans, but I ain't know that. Right. You feel what I'm saying? So I got my fans listening to what I'm saying. They gonna do what I'm saying. Right. And that's basically how it is. That's basically how it became, you know what I'm saying? Okay. And it just like The screw tapes went to a massive. Red cars went to a massive. People screaming the South Side went to a massive. Everything just involved because the screw tapes involved.
And so, again, so since these tapes were like intra-community messaging systems, they promoted the connection between Red Slabs and Southside identity, right? And then conversely, at the same time, blue became the most popular color on the North Side. But in the mid-1990s, according to oral history, people from the North Side began stealing slab cars from the South Side, and sometimes this would happen violently. Why did it happen? Mostly because of economics. The South Side was the epicenter of slab culture back then, and these are deeply impoverished areas, and you could get a lot of money, right, by selling these car parts. And then also, of course, there was this long-standing rivalry between the sides of town. A slab and streets kind of veteran named Piism the Mac, he's pictured to the far right with the white car. He offered or told me this and gave me this firsthand account that actually seemed to suggest that this violence between the North Side and South Side was as much about emotions and place as it was economics.
Kind of crazy stuff, you know. I mean, I had gotten a shootout on the freeway once. Yeah, on 59. In the slab, you know, I was riding the slab, you know, and I had hats in the back, you know, with South Acres, you know, representing my hood, and these North Side dudes rode on the side of me and was trying to run into my car on 59, and I had to start busting on them.
Yeah. So essentially, he's saying that he was riding on the freeway in his slab. He had a hat in the back that said his neighborhood, South Acres, in the South Side. And what he assumes were some guys from the North Side started trying to run him off the road, right? And they tried to shoot up his car.
Kind of crazy stuff, you know.
All right. And so this conflict didn't last that long. It lasted for a few years, and it actually, during that period, it ended up in the music, the screw music, as rappers from both sides of town began to symbolically and discursively defend their neighborhoods through rap music. Now, Fat Pat, pictured to the left, who was a member of the Screwed Up Clique and also very notable in the slab community, he released his freestyle called Wineberry Over Gold, which was probably the first time that this beef was mentioned in the music.
Tripping, them north side niggas, they coming over here flipping, trying to run us set, but nigga you can bet, it's time to grab the gas and go on make a nigga witness like the pistol, grab the fucking pump, and niggas come on, put these niggas in the trunk, cause as it's south side, niggas hold your card, nigga like you said, we just on that boulevard, how can a nigga come from that homestead?
And then, rappers from the North Side responded with songs that celebrated their neighborhood and their culture. And good example of this is North Side Anthem. And here's a few seconds of that.
Turning heads when I ride, never been south, but represent the north side. Truckin', fofo, and make your boy sick. You know the north side acting bad in the east.
All right. Actually, this song, North Side Anthem, is actually a freestyle vocal performance over, or actually a remake of a song called Southside by the Lil Kiku, who I mentioned a few seconds ago. So this North Side, South Side conflict went on for a couple years, but it was actually music again that helped calm tensions. For example, in the early 2000s, South Side rapper ESG and North Side rapper Slim Thug released a song called Braids and Fades, which essentially celebrated African American culture and life on both sides of town.
Now when I come down, I be throwing up the north. And when when I come down, I be chucking up the south. Switch a house and rig shop, don't stop. Body rocking in the drop, Slim Thug and ESG. Rhino Grease, in the block, say what? The boppers bob and the
So yeah, it was through musical collaborations between rappers from the North Side and South Side that helped calm these tensions and really settle this sometimes violent conflict.
Tripping, them off.
But even as culture grows and changes at a rapid rate, Houston's hip hop heritage continues to persist largely because of the continued desire to rep your hood. And this pride of place is causing people to hold tight to this hip hop heritage. For example, the aforementioned DJ Screw has been exalted to godlike status within the hip hop scene. There are numerous actually DJ Screw murals in the city, and even DJ Screw tattoos are somewhat common. People from all over the world flock, and also locals, flock to Screwed Up Records and Tapes in Hiram Clark, which is the second version of the record store that DJ Screw opened. And they do this sometimes just to symbolically feel his presence, even though he died in 2000 and actually never stepped foot in this particular location. The shop also continues to release much posthumous DJ Screw mixtapes. I think in his lifetime, he recorded like 200 tapes, and many of those, maybe most of them, have been released since his death. And you can only officially get them through this shop. And also, with every passing year comes a slew of new DJ Screw and Screw music tributes from artists in the city. One of my favorites is actually What Would Screw Do by an artist named EDF, a name that was actually inspired by the aforementioned ESG. Let's listen to a couple seconds of that song.
Hey, what would Screw do? Grab a styrofoam cup. Hey, what would Screw do?
Hold up and show up, drink till they throw up, and then post some more up. Moving too fast, wait a second, man, hold up.
Hey, say the goods are young, I do agree. Lost backpack, Big Mo, Doug K, Pimp C, Big Steve, last but not least, DJ Screw. Hell was almost the whole DEA crew. Hey, but
And so in this clip, you know, What Would Screw Do it kind of reflects, again, like I mentioned, the deification of Screw among Houston hip hop artists. For EDF and other local artists, DJ Screw is a mark of local excellence. He is a symbol of the genius and prowess that could emerge out of these Black Houston neighborhoods. And as such, they celebrate him at every turn. And yeah, again, similar, younger artists continue to represent the city and their neighborhoods. They're actually managing to embrace this local hip hop heritage while also staying very fresh with the sounds, the larger hip hop sounds of the times. A good example of this is Toby Nwigwe, who is a younger artist from Houston who has a major mainstream buzz. His video From the SWAT is a tribute to his neighborhood, Southwest Alief, Texas. And the video itself features slabs and their Screw elements. And so here, you know, he's definitely embracing local heritage while also employing his unique musical identity.
Looking from the SWAT, you can get your issue. Looking from the SWAT, you can get your issue. Looking from the SWAT, you can get your issue. Looking from the SWAT, you can get your issue.
Look, I grew up in Winfield on Farm Park. Two options, fight for your life or starve.
So yes, Houston has its own long-standing hip-hop heritage that is largely inspired by local artists and Black folks' connection to and embodiment of places and spaces that are that have value to them. But heritage in general is not flat nor universal, right? For some people, it can affirm and empower, right? And for others, it can be incredibly limiting and even harmful. And so in the book, I explore the complexities of hip hop heritage through three different artistic communities. And each of these communities has their own particular connection to, this local heritage. And they use it in different ways, and it produces different outcomes for them. So, street-based artists, there are street-based artists who are the ones who actively and directly adhere to the local tradition. They feel like one of their key duties as artists is to support this local heritage. So their music is still very much rooted in the screw tradition, and they actively talk about slabs and such. And because local audiences also deeply connect to this local heritage, these street artists are among the most successful artists in the scene. And if you listen to their music, they make sure to reinforce their representation of place and connection to heritage through their music, public performances, and also, though, by maintaining active presence in the communities from where they come from. But then at the same time, there's another segment of artists in Houston who call themselves underground artists. And these are artists whose styles diverge greatly from the screw sound. They have wide-ranging influences and are mostly driven by their own individual creative impulses. They feel like they are part of Houston's hip hop heritage, but they don't always feel obligated to adhere to its principles or the larger tradition, right? And because of this, they actually struggle for relevancy in the scene. Pictured here is the mighty D. Risha, who is one of my favorite underground artists in Houston. His music has been influenced by so many different things, especially pop culture, and films and games and such, right? Pictured to the center here is his debut LP, Big Trouble in Houston, Texas, which was obviously inspired by the 1980s film Big Trouble in Little China. So again, you see him pulling directly from non-Houston hip hop based experiences and practices and media. But despite his varying influences and his personal musical identity, right? D. Risha is from the north side of Houston. He is rooted in local hip hop heritage, and so you see him actively making songs that reference it. The song Ebonics is his signature song, and it's dedicated to local hip hop slang and also screw culture. So he's an underground artist, right, whose music doesn't necessarily sound like screw music, but he both naturally and strategically references the culture at times. And here's just a brief example of his music. This is a live performance of Ebonics. And in this clip, D. Rich is performing with his old crew, the Rogue Scholars Collective, which is a crew of artists that represent all manner or come from all parts of the city of Houston, and also reflects the demographic diversity of Houston's underground scene, which is, again, just much more diverse in terms of race and ethnicity than the street segment of Houston scene. And in the book, I also talk to and work with Christian hip hop artists who pull from local hip hop heritage as a tool of ministry. Of course, as you could probably hear and see, there are elements of local heritage that, conflict with their Christian ideals. But in the music and performances and in their public image, you see them reference the screw sound. They reference the slabs and such in order to connect with and minister to locals, right? So yes, for some of these folks, Houston hip hop heritage is also a tool of ministry. And so I'm a public folklorist, and I know that heritage is often in danger, right? Innovations, changing attitudes, technology, the economy, migrations, these are all things that can threaten the vitality of a tradition or heritage. So it's always important to safeguard or protect the heritage. And that's true for Houston too, Houston hip hop too. There are several culture workers out there who are repping for the city or their hoods by working to protect local traditions, right? And alongside rap artists, yeah, there's just many different types of culture workers who are working to preserve and grow local hip hop heritage. For example, Rocky Rocket to the far left is a museum educator. Next to her is a picture of Donnie Houston with the red hats, and he's a journalist and podcaster. I actually went to middle school with him. Next to him is Julie Grobe, who is an archivist at the University of Houston Library System, and she developed the first Houston hip hop archive. And next to her is Lance Skywalker, who is a prolific writer who has been chronicling the Houston hip hop scene for many years, and he's published multiple books about the scene. Most recently, this incredible biography of DJ Screw. And I've also tried to represent my hood and safeguard hip hop heritage in Houston in my own way. In 2013, I organized a Houston Slab Parade and Family Festival, which was an event highlighting the slab culture, right? And also Houston's hip hop heritage. The Slab Parade, as it's mostly called, featured a parade that included 50 slab cars, as well as 20 custom bikes that were built by area youth. And it also featured hip hop musical performances, dance performances, poetry, live art, and more. And so in the event, we really tried to reflect the traditional slab in hip hop culture. The parade was a more elaborate slab line. So participants were organized by paint color as they kind of moved unhurriedly and swerved in and out of lanes in the Houston streets. And upon arriving at McGregor Park, which is where the festival was held, they parked by paint color and there was an informal car show. And again, the park became a site of a festival featuring food, street art, and music performances by various members of the Houston hip hop scene. And it was super successful. I think 4,000 people attended that day. And since the Slab Parade, both slab and Houston hip hop are now being seen as important civic traditions. It's not just hip hop heritage. It's not just segmented off, right? Hip hop and slab culture has moved to the center of Houston's mainstream cultural fabric. It's part of local, citywide, cross-cultural celebrations. So ultimately, my point is that hip hop is a quote folk culture. It's not understood as such. It's not often understood as such, but hip hop is very much a folk music and culture. Not folk in the genre sense, right? But it's certainly music that at its core is developed by small communities, these folk groups, and it reflects their way of life, social values, and creative impulses. Hip hop documents and creatively communicates the experiences, attitudes, and worldviews of working class African Americans and Latinx peoples. It's entertainment, but it also communicates ideas and information within these particular folk groups. So even the most popular hip hop styles that you'll see on television and, on Spotify or whatever, all of those have, a folk root or foundation. They all started as these small group practices, and some of them became traditions. Yeah, so that's it as far as my presentation. I can stop sharing and we can get into some dialogue if you want, or Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Langston.
Thank
Those cars are amazing.
you. I think so.
And yeah, and to see them lined up by color, wow. So thank you so much. I learned so much from this presentation. And we don't have any questions in the chat right now, but please, all you people out there, if you would like to ask Langston something or relate your own love of hip hop, please do chime in, and we're happy to have your voices here. And I know that Jacob, to put him on the spot, is a hip hop nerd. So
Yeah, no, and thank you again. This was incredible. It's like I definitely want to check out the DJ Screw biography
That's good.
because
Yeah.
it's kind of like as you were referencing him, and it's just like, yeah, you pick up on all like how far that kind of slow down style has kind of integrated into hip hop
Yeah.
music. And you were talking at the end there, kind of like how folk culture is always kind of at odds with technology. And so that was one of my questions is kind of how is the new influence of like trap rap and things like that kind of influence the hip hop culture in Houston?
Yeah, it's certainly a big influence. And that's the interesting thing about Houston hip hop is that somehow it's been able to maintain this local sound, right? As hip hop on a global scale, right, changes rapidly. I do think, because of technology and because of just kind of this open access to various traditions and sounds. I do, based on what I hear, and I'm getting older, so I'm not, my ear isn't to the streets as it once was. But what I do hear is that, these sounds, these non-Houston sounds are taking up more kind of cultural space within the city. And, I mean, that's fine. And I think that's just kind of that's just kind of the natural flow of culture. But I also think it's awesome that, there are people in the city, artists, audiences, and cultural workers who are working to maintain that local tradition. But, you can't really stop the flow of time. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like some other people had similar questions about technology and music. So definitely in the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And one question here from Nancy is kind of how are the North Side and the South Side people you work with to kind of create this book? How did they receive kind of your research?
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, great question. Yeah, they received it really well. I started doing this field work 10 years ago. And the scene and culture back then looks very different than it does now. A lot of the folks who were active back then aren't active as artists anymore. But I've got nothing but just praise and excitement and just affirmations about this book. People really were delighted to see their stories detailed and presented in this kind of way. In fact, the Mighty D. Risha, who I mentioned a few minutes ago, he had he wasn't performing as much anymore. I mean, his career, he kind of put it on hold. He had a kid and all these different things. And the book came out, and all of a sudden he put on a show. And I saw him on an interview, and he literally said, like, it was this book that came out that prompted me to get back on the stage and make more music. And that's cool, and that's probably the best response or review that I've gotten for this book, that it would push him to get back on the stage. So no, I've gotten nothing but great responses to the book, I'll say.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad because I know that's hard work, and 10 years is a lot of time to kind of dedicate to a project.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so another question coming in here from Yancey is, how do you feel like the resurgence of chopped and screw music has come around? And he references specifically Metro Boomin bringing it more mainstream.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's good. I'm that process of mainstreaming the screwed and chopped music started, I guess, kind of the mid 2000s with artists like Paul Wall and UGK and all of them. And since then, it's become, the sound at least has become a firm part of hip hop culture, and not even like as associated with Houston anymore. And that's cool. That's cool. And I think, artists in Houston, while they want their credit, for originating this sound, I think they're happy and proud that, they've left their mark on the national hip hop landscape, because that's what everybody wants to do, right? And so Metro Boomin, there's slow and reverb now, right? All these things, right, are just markers of, Houston's impact on the larger hip hop scene and also pop culture. So it's awesome.
Yeah, no, and I again kind of like that legacy and kind of with Screw's life.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I have this one correct. It's DJ Screw: A Life in Slow Revolution is the
That's
autobiography,
it.
or
Yeah,
not the
it's great.
autobiography, but the biography.
Yeah, it's great.
Perfect. So I'll put that link in the chat here
Yeah.
quickly. And I know I really appreciate you kind of framing this as looking at place identity and kind of looking at how that really creates a culture and things within that. And a lot of people are kind of asking questions about what other cities and rural life kind of plays into that. And so I'm curious, what kind of other locations or cities would you want to kind of do similar research in? Is there
Ooh.
anything kind of top of mind there?
Sure. I don't know if I'll do it, but Memphis is another I'm just a fan of Memphis's hip hop scene. I mean, it's weird in like the best ways possible, right? And it's certainly rooted in just the cultural heritage of Black folks in that city, the hoodoo, the blues music, right? And all that stuff, right? You can hear that in the sounds coming from the area. So I'd love to do that work. But really, I'm here in the Midwest too, and I'm also interested in exploring hip hop out here, which sounds and looks very different than Memphis or in Houston and these other southern locales. Yeah, Memphis, maybe Cincinnati has a really cool scene, especially in terms of underground hip hop. Portland, Maine has a really like long-standing, really cool and interesting hip hop heritage. So I mean, there's hip hop locales everywhere that are worthy of exploration, I'd say.
Yeah, no, I agree, because one of my favorite things is, as I was doing some work and living in South America, was kind of getting the Latin hip hop and kind
Sure.
of
Yeah.
seeing how, as like you mentioned, a global phenomenon has kind of again taken up place identity in these different hubs and really kind of spurred on new generations and new versions of what hip hop can be.
Yeah.
And I think again that some other questions again are talking about how does your work kind of combat that the idea of hip hop as a violent medium and stuff like that. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit on that as well.
Yeah. I think it, really just places hip hop culture in its proper cultural context, right? And so, I certainly talk about violence in the book because while I wouldn't say it's couched in hip hop culture, it's certainly, unfortunately, a part of some of these communities that produce hip hop because of all these different reasons I kind of talked about. And so, for me, it's helping folks understand that this, violence it's not an inherent part of the music, right? It's part of the problematic and unfortunate results of American racism, right? And that's how I talk about it, and that's how it should be seen. And when we listen to the music, right, what we're hearing is the bitter fruits of racism, and that's how we should take it. And so I just kind of, it's just about, offering that context and using hip hop as a lens to explore, right, those situations.
Yeah, and I always think what I fell in love with hip hop was kind of the storytelling behind it,
Yes.
and how kind of if you take it at front face value like that, you're missing so much of the deeper intricacies and storytelling and lyricism that kind of goes into creating this art form. And so
Absolutely.
yeah. And I'll say we're almost at our hour, but a few more questions keep coming in. And one of these is there a drive to kind of archive some of the actual media of the movement? So with cassettes and mixtapes and CDs like that, or is it kind of more relying now on digitizing those things for archives?
A little bit of both. Yeah, so there's two hip hop archives in Houston, one at Rice University, one at the University of Houston, and they're definitely taking in physical media and because of becoming repositories for those physical products. At the same time, yeah, there's a big movement to digitize, especially DJ Screw's mixtapes, which were originally only produced on cassette tape. I think later on CD, right? Both of those are problematic mediums, right? So there is like, yeah, a big push to both digitize, but also preserve, all that physical media and ephemera, certainly.
Yeah, you know, they don't do well when you drop them on the ground or try to preserve them
No,
very long.
or
They're
drop them in your closet and all. Yeah, yeah.
right. It's like I always remember the shoe boxes of mixtapes and CDs that you
Oh yeah,
kind of
yeah.
collect.
Yep.
Um, and I guess another question for you is if someone's looking to kind of jump in and really just start, like, hasn't really listened to hip hop at all, what are some artists that you would kind of recommend people to kind of jump in with?
Like hip hop in general.
Well, I would say hip hop in general, but also kind of locally to the Houston
Oh,
scene.
sure. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
DJ Screw, obviously, and
Yeah,
his legacy, but
that's yeah, I would start with DJ Screw, and there are DJ Screw, not necessarily tapes, but compilations available on Spotify and Apple Music, I think, that I would check out. I would also there are also artists like Paul Wall and Slim Thug who had national acclaim, and they are good kind of primers, right, for Houston's hip hop scene. Um, but yeah, I start there, and outside of Houston, I could go any different direction. I saw someone mention Minneapolis and Atmosphere. I'm a big Atmosphere fan too, so if you're looking for good hip hop, you would go there too.
yeah. I know, and it's again, it's like it's so cool just to see how it evolves and changes, and yeah, I'm really curious to kind of see and like explore more of those local communities and kind of do a deep dive with that. And always
Absolutely.
shout out to Megan Thee Stallion, like props
Oh
to
yeah,
her. Also,
I've talked
just
about her 3 times today, twice in my classes, and then here. So yeah, shout out to her.
right, and she was just on SNL this past
Oh, I didn't
weekend.
even know
So
that. Very cool.
yeah,
Very cool.
you know, connecting music. She's featured in the new Mean Girls
Yeah,
musical movie. So
everywhere.
awesome. Well, very much thank you so much, Langston, for spending your time and evening with us
Thank you.
today. On behalf of Vermont Humanities and the Brooks Memorial Library, we really appreciate everyone coming out tonight to listen to this. And again, it's always a great exploration to start, but there's so much more to dig in. And I hope everyone also kind of takes that opportunity to look and discover more about Houston's hip hop culture there. So thank you all for joining, and we hope to see you next week for Fuuk Chan's memoir discussion.
Thank you.